Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here, joining you from temporary quarters. A gentleman named Beliefsarenottruth that's his YouTube handle, has addressed my video on Aristotle's Unmoved Mover. Now, I thought that the cast of crazies on Mr. Cropper's YouTube solar system or something, I thought the cast was complete. We had Zorio, Azrianok, Scientific Discussion, Randy Heltzerman. I thought we had almost every permutation we could get, of subjectivism and Kantianism and rationalism and stuff. But now, straight out of central casting comes a rationalist, just purely rationalist. He's rationalism distilled to its finest, or to its most potent, or something like that. And rationalism's not good. I'll speak as an objectivist here. So the finest in rationalism is like really good vodka. Who the hell wants that, Here he is. His name is Beliefsarenottruth. I didn't catch his name. I should probably refer to him as Mike. That's most likely his name. He says that I have committed a whole bunch of fallacies in my video on Aristotle's Unmoved Mover. So I'm going to go through a few of the fallacies he accuses me of. It turns out I don't have to go through all of them. 2 or 3 or at the most 4 examples will do for our purposes, ladies and gentlemen. He starts by accusing me of the genetic fallacy. And here's his definition of the genetic fallacy. Simply knowing why someone said something or how they came to believe it has no bearing on the truthhood of that belief. Okay. He says that I have posited a connection between the truthfulness of Aristotle's Unmoved Mover belief or idea and his reason for positing that. Because I say, with Will Durant, I think that Will Durant is probably right, that Aristotle seems to have done the Unmoved Mover jig in order to keep from drinking hemlock. And now Mike here comes along, or whatever his name is, Bant, we'll call him Beliefs Are Not Truth, B-A-N-T, Bant. There we go, we'll call him Bant. Bant comes along and says, aha, the Unmoved Mover might be true, even though the reason for positing that was to avoid drinking hemlock. Ooh, you got me. So, I guess I'm guilty of that fallacy. Good job. But the Unmoved Mover doesn't exist. So, given that, if we say, why would Aristotle posit the idea, given that it's not true? See, that's where Bant is confused. He says, we're not assuming it's not true. We have to assume that it is true because we're investigating and we're doing philosophy as his professors have taught him. He has a very long list of fallacies. The next one he accuses me of the appeal to ignorance, which we will be getting to. He has a very long list of fallacies. On this list of fallacies, there is no place for the fallacy of violating reality. You can never say to Mr. Bant, sir, that violates reality. You can't go there. He'll say, no, it's not on my list of fallacies. Besides, what is reality? And he actually goes into that in this video response to me in my video, saying that I seem to be granting ontology to reality. And I just, okay, thank you. Now at 2 minutes and 4 seconds, he accuses me of labeling or categorizing God as a thing, which he says is equivocation. So there's the next fallacy, is equivocation. Yes, we will be getting to the appeal to ignorance a bit later. In my equivocation fallacy, I equivocate God with, or the Unmoved Mover, with normal things. I say, things exist in time. God is a thing, therefore time existed during God's existing before the universe, right? He says, aha, Mr. Cropper, you don't get to go there, you don't get to do that, because the definition of the unmoved mover is specifically that he is outside of normal reality. Oh, well, that's it then. You win. The problem is, there is nothing outside of reality. So, I win if we talk about reality. Mr. Bant wins if we just put our blinders on and ignore reality and just say, I'm only looking at the lines on this paper. The lines on the paper say that the unmoved mover is outside of reality. Well, if that's all that's important to you, is that the unmoved mover is outside of reality, you do win. Just remember that the unmoved mover is not outside of reality. The unmoved mover doesn't exist. So that's where a lot of these confusions come in. He wants me to argue about it as if I had no clue, no idea, no beliefs, and no certainty at all. As if I was completely open to the unmoved mover hypothesis. No, I'm looking at the unmoved mover hypothesis as, what a bizarre fantasy. How could Aristotle, such a brilliant guy, have come up with such a bizarre fantasy? But he believed women had fewer teeth than men, so he didn't really look really closely into everything that he wrote down. Still, it is interesting that such a brilliant guy could have come up with the unmoved mover. I think my hypothesis, I think Will Durant's point, is pretty good. I think it was to avoid hemlock. I think Aristotle was an atheist. None of the things I've just been saying in the last 20, 30 seconds is even interesting to Mr. Beliefs Are Not Truth. He's, okay, all that's just fluff. Whether or not Aristotle did it for this or that reason has no bearing on the unmoved mover for him. The unmoved mover has to be investigated on its own despite the reasons for its being posited. Now, let me just do a side note on that real quick. We go back to the first fallacy, the genetic fallacy, because I remembered a point. It's true that the reason for something being posited doesn't bear on the truthhood of it, but it can. Ooh, that's going to be a difficult concept to grasp here. For example, if Isaac Newton comes up to me, and let's just try to grant for a second that he's alive and could do that. Okay, let's not get off on that. Let's say Isaac Newton comes up to me and says, there are gremlins on the far side of the moon, they wear chainmail socks. And I say, what's your reason for that? That sounds like nonsense. I'm not going to believe that. That's ridiculous. And he says, ooh, gotcha, Mr. Cropper. It's the genetic fallacy. The reason that I say there are gremlins on the far side of the moon has no bearing on whether or not there really are gremlins on the far side of the moon. Mr. Cropper, you're being illogical. Oh my God. Mr. Newton, come on. I can understand, Isaac. May I call you Isaac? I can understand, Isaac, that you would say there's this thing called gravity, which is proportional to the distance squared from an object, and it pulls things together, mass attracts matter, because you've got all this math and all this evidence. I can understand that. I just don't understand the the little green men on the far side of the moon, and I don't see a reason for that. So I think Isaac Newton would be with me. He would say, well, you're right. The law of gravity, I do have some reasons to say that. This other thing I've just made up out of nowhere. See, Beliefs Are Not Truth would say, oh, that doesn't invalidate it. You still have to investigate and see if there are little green men on the far side. Just saying that he came up with it because he's an idiot, or he came up with it to avoid drinking hemlock, or he came up with it, as a homework assignment, doesn't invalidate it. It could still be true. Well, it's not true, though. Let's keep returning to that point. So he has this great list of fallacies his professor gave him. At 535, he accuses me of the appeal to ignorance, as follows. If the unmoved mover created this, says Mr. Cropper, then who created the unmoved mover, right? If God created this, who created God? Why do you get to put the baseboards down and say, God created it? You have to start somewhere. Here was God, He created it. Why can't I put the baseboards down and say, here is reality? Nobody needs to create it. And he says, pointing out that we don't understand a thing or its cause, we don't understand the unmoved mover or where it comes from or whatever, we don't understand the unmoved mover fully, doesn't prove that it doesn't exist, right? So pointing out that we would need another unmoved mover before the unmoved mover to create him and another one before him to create him does not invalidate the hypothesis that there's one unmoved mover which created everything. I'm just pointing out, well, what about the next unmoved mover? We don't know anything about him. Oh, well, that doesn't prove the first unmoved mover wrong. So how the hell am I going to prove the first unmoved mover wrong? I say by pointing out 100 different places where it doesn't make sense. And every single one of them is being struck down in his list of fallacies. But then the problem is that the fallacy list doesn't start off, which it should. It should start off with, always obey reality. If you violate reality, then you can't even get going. These fallacies should only be applied to things that are consistent with reality. So if you're consistent with reality and allow for reality, then these fallacies wouldn't be coming up for you, Mr. Bant. You would realize the unmoved mover doesn't exist, and pointing out that the unmoved mover is just the beginning in an infinite chain of more unmoved movers to create the next one, to create the next one, and pointing out that we need a baseboard to stand on, and the baseboard's either the unmoved mover or it's reality. But if it's the unmoved mover, then we had to get another unmoved mover. But reality is a solid base. We don't have to go back before reality or things. Pointing that out is perfectly reasonable. And it invalidates these things in spite of the fact that it might fit within one line of one of your sheets that one of your professors gave you on logical fallacies. He accuses me of many more fallacies, and he really is upset about that. He thinks that fallacies, I guess, are the essence of logic or something. He even tells me to go read an elementary logic book, which is hilarious, because I'm a master at formal logic, so that's hilarious. He's an example of rationalism that is so comical that central casting would have a hard time fabricating this guy. He is a cliche of rationalism. Mr. Beliefs Are Not Truth. I don't want to say anything any more aggressive or violent than that, because he only has 2 videos up right now. And if we're to have some more rich examples of this distilled rationalism, we will have to hope that he'll put up some more videos.